If you want to cure your fatty liver, you gotta avoid. Hi friends. Most people think fatty liver is a sugar problem. Eat less sugar and it resolves their fatty liver.
What you've actually done is had sugar with your sugar all day long.
You fix fatty liver by cutting your carbohydrate intake drastically.
Well, that's only part of the story. They actually don't realize that the diets that they're following from super popular influencers is actually making their liver fattier, even though they are losing weight. So in this video, I'll show you why the wrong diet can actually make fatty liver worse. And we're gonna turn over accepted nutrition dogma for fatty liver. Of course, we will first go over the foods that are good for your liver, which will be easy for you to remember if you understand what your body was designed to eat. Unfortunately, eating healthy is harder than ever because stores today are filled with items that go against your natural metabolism and against your life savings. In essence, fatty liver is a disease of caloric excess. And the liver is trying to just help you out by storing those calories into fat. Unfortunately, some of that fat is bound to be stored in the liver. The thing is, you don't have to be fat to have fatty liver, and you don't have to overeat a ton of sugar to get fatty liver either. You just have to overwhelm your liver at any given point of time with calories, whether that's from fat or sugar, for the liver to be fatty. And that's because all your foods that you eat goes to your liver first. Your liver is your gatekeeper and your metabolic machine. And if your brain and your mouth chew and swallow faster than your liver can keep up with your metabolism, then you're bound to convert some of those calories to fat. In fact, you can be skinny and yet have insulin resistance, which means you have fatty liver. And this is a classic case of normal weight, but metabolically obese, which means you have a higher risk of getting type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and high blood pressure. But you look skinny. So I'm sure you know people who look skinny, but they have high blood pressure, they have high blood sugars, and they have heart disease. My name is Dr. Lou, and I'm a double board certified physician for almost 30 years. And at the time that I graduated from medical school, fatty liver meant just one thing: alcohol. Anybody who drank too much would get a ton of calories because alcohol has more calories than fat. So if you just drank less and you remove that toxin from the liver, naturally your fatty liver should reverse. Not so fast. That's because up to a certain point, the fat becomes scarring to your liver. And by removing the alcohol, the problem may not improve if your liver is all scarred up. But something really changed soon after graduation. A different pattern started to emerge. I began seeing men and women who didn't drink, who were trying to eat well, who even gave up sugar. They were told they had fatty liver, and some of them needed a liver transplant. So back then we called it iatrogenic fatty liver, meaning we had no idea how they got fat in their liver. The bottom line is, no matter the cause, a subset of people with fatty liver will have hardening of the liver. That means cirrhosis, and that could progress to liver cancer. But the good news is we now know exactly why millions of people have fatty liver that don't drink. Unfortunately, most people, they don't know they even have fatty liver. And here's the problem. I remembered cirrhosis. There is a window to fix your fatty liver. You miss that window, you get cirrhotic, you can't be fixed anymore. And that's why it's important for you to watch this whole video and for you to listen to the right influencers. Unfortunately, too many people are telling people, get skinny fast schemes that ultimately backfire. And there's really two important points to reversing fatty liver. Number one, you gotta remove the toxin, whether that's alcohol, sugar, or the equivalent, okay? Things that are excessive in calories or excess in calories. And let's say you remove one toxin, sugar, but you're still drinking and you're still doing all these other things that contribute to fatty liver, then you're not going to make much progress. The second thing is you have to be eating anti-inflammatory foods as well as following an anti-inflammatory lifestyle. And unfortunately, if you pile on number one, all the toxins, then the anti-inflammatory stuff isn't going to work better than removing the toxins. You got to do both together. In life, I think it's easier though to start adding foods, adding lifestyle habits instead of removing foods first. So let's go over the best foods to add first. Okay. Number one is broccoli sprouts. That's not the same as mature broccoli. Now, broccoli sprouts are super little tiny like seedlings that just sprouted a little, not even a leaf yet. Okay. Maybe a little tiny bud at the top. It has a stem and then a leaf. And the reason why they're so powerful is because they contain one of the most powerful nutrients called sulforaphanes in concentration. Sulforaphanes help your liver detoxify. And actually it contains glucoraphanin, which when you chew it and chop it, the enzyme myrosinase is released, which then converts glucoraphanin into sulforaphanes for you to then swallow and directly portal to your liver. Now, you can get sulforaphanes from other cruciferous vegetables such as kale and arugula and bok choy, but it is most concentrated in broccoli sprouts. The more vegetables you eat, the better your liver health will be. Now, we should all be aiming for at least 4 to 5 cups or 4 to 5 servings of leafy greens every day. Now, the second food is actually purple sweet potatoes. Not the same as a white potato, which we'll talk about later. They're actually completely different species of plants. The purple sweet potato, that purple color, are polyphenols. And those polyphenols are so anti-inflammatory that they support your liver in reducing inflammation. Now, if you've ever eaten a sweet potato with broccoli sprouts in a sandwich, then you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't eaten it together, you're really missing out in life. So how I prepare it is that I grate my sweet potatoes, and you can dry it up a bit by putting it in the oven. I usually add grated tofu along with onions, diced onions, and grated carrots. This combination feels so delicious, like all the textures and the flavors just burst in your mouth. And then you put that in between like 2 whole grain breads, and then you top it off with broccoli sprouts. Oh, that is so amazing. Drizzle some balsamic vinegar. It is delicious. So number 3 is you may want to consider eating barley. Barley is one of the best whole food choices to get yourself some beta-glucans. Beta-glucans are famous for lowering cholesterol, but that's not why I want you to eat that. It also reduces fatty liver through several mechanisms. Number 1 is slows glucose absorption. Number 2, you lower insulin demand. Number 3, you improve your fullness. Number 4, you reduce calories without food restriction. Number 5, you feed beneficial gut bacteria. Number 6, you increase short-chain fatty acid to decrease inflammation. Number 7, it improves bile acid metabolism. And on top of that, it helps to lower your cholesterol and triglycerides. Now, how do we know this works? Well, there's lots of evidence, especially in people who eat a high fiber intake. So in a 2023 analysis, they found that fiber-rich dietary patterns were negatively associated with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, meaning people eating more fiber tended to have lower risk of fatty liver. Now, the authors also noted that obesity partly mediated this relationship, which makes sense because fiber helps reduce your calorie intake. It improves satiety and weight control. Now, if you've never eaten barley, then when you go to the store, you'll likely find 2 kinds, whole hulled barley or pearl barley. Make sure you get the whole hulled barley. That's because you want to have the fiber on the outside. Now, if you have a pressure cooker, it'll be so much easier. Just cook it, push the grain settings, add water like what it tells you on the package, and then push the grain settings. Otherwise, if you do it stovetop, it may take about 45 minutes to cook the whole barley. Now, eat it as a rice replacement. And a good amount to start is half a cup of cooked barley a day. Number 4 is to add black beans, which not only contain a good amount of soluble fiber and resistant starch, but is high in protein. Now, that would pair super well with your barley. And you can even make it into, let's say, a barley patty with the beans. So I would start with 1 cup of cooked black beans, a cup of cooked barley, and then take your sweet potatoes, about half a cup or 3/4 of a cup, and mash that up. Combine all of it, mash your black beans. That's kind of how I eat my food. I just mash everything. And then you season it with, let's say, some spices, some half a teaspoon of cumin, half a teaspoon of smoked paprika, half a teaspoon of garlic powder. Ooh, onion powders, half a teaspoon of that. You can then add a quarter teaspoon of black pepper, a little chili powder if you want. If you don't have salt or high blood pressure issues, heart failure issues, kidney issues, you can add a little bit of sodium salt, right? And then to that, you want to make sure you add 1 to 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed or oat flour to bind the whole thing together. Otherwise, it's going to fall apart. If the mixture is too wet, add more oat flour. If it's too dry, add a spoonful of water or more mashed potato. Shape the patties and then you put them in the refrigerator to chill them for about 15 to 30 minutes. This will help firm them up into the right shape so when they bake up nice and pretty. And you could bake it at 400 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes. Flip it halfway through. If you want it crispier, you can actually cook it add a little bit of oil and pan fry it a little bit for 4 to 5 minutes on the side. The other option, a healthier option, is to air fry them at 375 for 12 to 15 minutes, flipping them once. And if you want the best flavor, you can add a little bit of acid to it to balance off the sweetness of the sweet potato. Good options would be lime juice, or you can add some tomato sauce or some balsamic vinegar. And then on top, you can make a salsa of chopped cilantro, red onions, green onions, maybe a little jalapeno, or saute some mushrooms with the whole thing. It would be delicious. Now, if you don't want to make the patty, that's fine too. But remember, you still should be eating the flax seeds ground up. The reason flax is so interesting to eat is because it's not just a regular seed. It actually has 3 liver-friendly tools in one food. It has soluble fiber, it has lignans, and it has plant omega-3 fatty acids called alpha-linolenic acid. First, the flax seeds, you know it has fiber because it forms a gel, so it has soluble fiber. So when you grind the flaxseed, mix it with water, it'll thicken. That's when you should eat it, not when it's dried up. And so when you make the patties, make sure it's wet, and then you can add it to your patties to maybe soak up some of the water as well. That same gel-like fiber can slow glucose absorption, improve fullness, support bowel movements, and you feed your gut bacteria. And this matters because the liver is directly connected to the gut through the portal vein. And what happens in the gut doesn't actually stay in the gut. It signals out directly to your liver. Now, so second, the flax seeds are one of the richest sources of lignans. And lignans are plant compounds with antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties that are supportive of your liver. And that matters because for fatty liver, the liver fat becomes very inflammatory. It's actually dangerous when you pair it with oxidative stress because then it induces more inflammation. It causes mitochondrial stress and it activates your immune system in the wrong way. And really, lignans are compounds that help protect against oxidative stress and inflammation. Now, the third major point is that flax seeds are a great source of polyunsaturated fats called alpha-linolenic acid or omega-3 fats. This is not the same as EPA, DHA from fish, but it can still support healthier lipid metabolism and inflammatory balance. A 2025 review on flaxseed and cardiometabolic health found that flaxseed supplementation can improve markers tied to metabolic syndrome, including lipid profile, blood pressure, body weight, and glycemic markers. And those are all relevant because fatty liver is often driven by the same metabolic patterns that drive all these other problems. And by the way, if you find values in my videos, would you mind checking if you're subscribed? And if you are not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button, like button, and share button because it does change how many people get to watch my videos. I appreciate your partnership in helping to change the world. Now, speaking of fats, did you know that removing bad fats will reverse fatty liver too? And why are fats bad? Because it's not sugar. Well, fat just isn't one thing. There are many different types of fats: trans fats, saturated fats, monosaturated fats, and polyunsaturated fats. Now, in these 4 categories, only one of them is essential for life, and that is polyunsaturated fats, which means your body can't make any of that, and you must get it through your food. And that's why eating flax seeds are extra beneficial. But that's not the same as eating trans fats, which is extra super bad. Trans fats skyrocketed as a man-made chemical fat promoted by the food industry to basically increase the shelf life of cheap food. And basically, trans fat extends its own shelf life. Did you know that it gets stuck in you because you can't metabolize it? So you can't use it as energy. Your body can't get rid of it. But the kicker is it's directly linked to heart disease. Trans fats make cheap foods last longer, but they also make your blood vessels age faster and they make your liver age faster. And unfortunately, our food system has been hijacked by these chemicals that extend shelf life, change texture, and give us fats and sugar. Now, technically, everything on earth is made out of a chemical, but in nature, they're diluted they're not concentrated and to be pretend food to like manipulate our foods, right? So what makes trans fat uniquely harmful is that it's so concentrated in processed food. It's not like natural fat. They distort the cell membranes and interfere with normal metabolic signaling. And inside the liver, it increases insulin resistance, meaning that your liver becomes less responsive to insulin signal to stop processing glucose properly. And sometimes this means that your liver is making sugar even when your body doesn't need it. Trans fats entered the food system in 1911 when Crisco was launched by Procter & Gamble. And this was one of the first widely used hydrogenated oils. Now, the goal was really simple. Create a cheap, shelf-stable fat that didn't spoil like butter or lard. So from the 1950s through the 1990s, trans fats exploded in use, and they became the backbone of processed foods, baked goods. I mean, it was in margarine, right? Fast food, fryers. Ironically, they were marketed as heart-healthy alternatives to saturated fat. And food manufacturers finally were given until 2018 to get it all the way out of the food system. But really, that's more like 2020. And after that, trans fats were effectively banned from most processed foods in the US. But that doesn't mean that there's no trans fats in your food, because companies can still list zero trans fat, even if it has 0.5 grams of fat, trans fat, that is. So small amounts can still sneak in as zero. And of course, that's just per serving, right? So if you have a tub that has 20 servings, then it has 0.5 times 20 amounts of trans fat. So, but if you see anything that's partially hydrogenated oils in the list, skip that food. Trans fats can also form in small amounts when oil is repeatedly heated, like deep frying. I remember when trans fat enters your liver, it disrupts the normal fat metabolism, increases insulin resistance, promotes inflammation, and pushes the liver towards storing more fat instead of clearing it. And in animal studies, diets containing trans fat have produced liver dysfunction, disturbed liver metabolism, hepatic steatosis, and NASH-like liver injury. Basically, it's produced fatty liver. Trans fats can also increase de novo lipogenesis. That means the liver makes more new fat. It can also worsen glucose tolerance and insulin resistance. So then your insulin stays higher, and higher insulin tells the liver to make more fat, store more fat, and stop burning fat. And of course, no one noticed this problem because trans fat help keep cookies crispier, pastries stay flakier, fried foods more stable. But inside the body, they made lipoproteins more atherogenic, arteries more inflamed, and metabolism less flexible. Now, the World Health Organization has been pushing worldwide to eliminate the industrialization of trans fat, but really only 60 countries have best practices when it comes to trans fat policies. So if you eat imported stuff, just check your ingredient list because it may have partially hydrogenated oils. And this is especially prevalent in shelf-stable products like bakery products, shortenings, certain frostings. Deep fried foods in other countries that don't have strong rules may have a lot of trans fats. Now, keep in mind that there are natural trans fats, small amounts in meat and in dairy, basically from ruminant animals. That means your cow and your sheep. But the ultra-processed food is so much more concentrated. So number 2 is added fructose or sucrose, which are these little sugar cubes. Too many people have confused this as food. Does this look anything like food? These are literally chemicals, folks, right? These little cubes are chemicals. This is table sugar, but it's a chemical, ultra-processed. These are unnatural ingredients. You're not going to find this outside in nature. without man manipulating it. And the thing is, sucrose has fructose, and fructose normally is found inside whole food. But the difference is when you purify it out, like high fructose corn syrup, you're not eating whole food, you're eating a chemical. Now, how did America get trained to eat so much added chemicals that they think looking at this looks like food? Well, in the 1990s, that was a low-fat years. And people assume if fat got you sick, then remove it and you should get skinny, right? Well, it depends on what you're substituting the fat with. Now, remember the brand Snackwells? In the 1990s, Snackwell was everywhere, and I ate plenty of them. I vividly remember how they marketed themselves as a low-fat food and built their cookies to be fat-free, but then they added a ton of sugar to make up for the fat. So honestly, the sugar never really made up the same taste. It just didn't taste right when it didn't have fat, but I still ate it because supposedly it was better for you. At least that's what it said on the package. Now, I've learned my lesson. Never learn your nutrition facts from a food packaging. Now, unfortunately, I grew up with a horrible sweet tooth. So these low-fat foods were really low in fat, but they were still very high in added sugars. And when you overate the added sugar, well, what happens? The liver sees all that added sugar, right? It just surges straight to your liver. And then the liver is overwhelmed and converts that sugar into fat. So remember how I told you trans fat causes de novo lipogenesis? Well, so does added sugar, whether it's sucrose or fructose. So number 3 is to avoid overeating, especially the wrong items, like those late night snacks, ice cream or sugary snacks or savory snacks. Your body doesn't have the metabolism to convert late night calories into energy, but instead it's going to be storing those late night calories into liver fat. And today's food landscape is just so easy to overeat excessive calories, so easy to eat late at night, especially processed foods that are cheap, made out of highly refined ingredients that start with starch and then with added sugar. And they don't even taste that good without them manipulating the texture and the flavor with chemicals. And before you know it, you're overeating calories. And that's why it's important to avoid refined starch. Now, it is so easy to eat things with refined starch, from refined wheat to rice and corn, because the texture is soft or it's crunchy when you add some fat. It could be sweet or salty, right? You got yourself a blockbuster hit like Doritos. And this is exactly why people who advocate a ketogenic diet or a paleo diet, they advocate to stop eating grains. But grains aren't exactly the problem, folks, if you eat whole grains. You remember how I introduced you to barley? And that's because if you eat whole hulled barley, you're eating that soluble fiber. That soluble fiber is actually protecting you from the starch. But when you remove that soluble fiber, then you get refined flours. And that concentrates the starch. And that overwhelms the liver when you eat it. It's really avoiding cooking flour. Now, if you're going to bake with flour, use whole grain flour. It makes a huge difference in your liver fat. And then add some nuts and seeds, especially those nuts and seeds with polyunsaturated fats like walnuts and flax seeds. So this is 11 cubes of sugar. Did you know that when you eat white rice, that starch gets directly converted into sugar? And it's a cup of cooked white rice, it's about 11 cubes of sugar that goes straight to your liver. Now, if I remove one of these cubes, 10 cubes of sugar, that's actually the amount of sugar that's in a can of soda, right? This is why white rice is not that much better than soda, because it gets converted into direct sugar. But of course, sugar just surges your system even faster when you're drinking your sugar water. And this is true if you're eating sugar water or if you're drinking sugary teas, right? Just be very careful when you eat starches, refined starches, as well as sugar water. Now, the other thing I wanted to impress upon you is that the fat that gets trapped in the liver is saturated fat. So number 4, if you're going to eat saturated fat, it's probably going to raise your cholesterol and it will change your liver's instruction. So saturated fat actually tells the liver to store more fat and to respond less well to insulin. It actually promotes more inflammation, more fat signals, and your liver will struggle to burn fuel cleanly. And that's why fatty liver is not just a sugar problem. It's a fat quality problem too. So the biggest sources of saturated fat would be butter, cheese, cream cheese, whole milk, fatty meats, processed meats, coconut oil, palm oil, which then you'll find pastries, fast food, fried foods, and ultra-processed snacks full of saturated fat. And that's why when you eat more fat and the wrong fat, it'll make it difficult for your liver to process the sugar and starches. Speaking of which, number 5 is avoid white potatoes like russet potatoes, especially when you deep fry them or pan fry them or eat them with oils and fats. They have the highest glycemic index of all these potatoes because they have a high content of starch. Now, if you must eat white potatoes, just boil it in water and avoid the added fats because I know they make them taste better, but it reduces how well your liver can metabolize the starch from the potato. It's way too convenient, too common to find these potatoes served with fat in any grocery or restaurant or fast food place, right? Now, the other day, I actually saw a burrito filled with deep fried potatoes. That is why I make it a rule not to eat potatoes outside. That's just a liver attack waiting to happen. But if you boil them in water, you can actually lose some weight and it can help you reduce your liver fat. Now, most people find that to be too boring to eat. So if you're going to go for potatoes, go for a potato with a lower to medium glycemic index, such as fingerling potatoes or red and purple potatoes. Avoid the white potatoes because they're just way too starchy. Now, number 6 is another white food, white rice. And I know a lot of people think that is a health food because it's been eaten in the Asian culture for centuries. Yeah, by emperors, right? Emperors had to get someone to mill it by hand. In the more recent history, it actually has caused the collapse of the Japanese Navy as well as tens of thousands of people in Southeast Asia. Why? Because white rice is a nutritionally deficient food. It's essentially pure starch, folks. Literally 11 sugar cubes is what it turns out to be. And whenever you eat starch without fiber, you basically will surge these calories in to overwhelm your liver. Now, if you must eat rice, go for a colored rice, brown rice, purple rice, red rice. But just know that all rice, they contain super duper levels of arsenic. And arsenic is a liver toxin too. Okay, another white food. Can you think of it? White flour. White flour does not have the fiber, especially the soluble fiber that protects you from all the starch. And essentially, when you eat white flour, whether that's white wheat flour or white rice flour, you're just overwhelming your liver with starches that convert into sugar. If it has too much sugar, the liver will automatically convert some of that sugar into fat. And inevitably, some of that fat will get trapped in your liver as fatty liver. You can go to any dim sum place or Asian supermarket. You'll be surrounded by junky white flour products. And I know they taste good, whether it's savory or sweet. But if you want to cure your fatty liver, you gotta avoid white colored food. The stuff in the pastries and in the freezer section. Number 8 is avoid sugary drinks, whether that's sweetened iced tea, fancy boba, or soda. Now, I know they're all addictive because I've been addicted to all of them at one time in my life. But when you surge your body with sugar, it goes straight to the liver first. So all your food goes straight to the liver, and that's why it is so important to protect your liver by controlling the rate at which you're eating food. And the best way to control that is to eat whole food with fiber first, so that can act as a buffer for all your other foods. Now, I know that the do not eat list may seem overwhelming because some of you may be eating directly from this list. But believe it or not, there are so many healthy substitutes, even for something like bread. And if you want to learn more about that, watch the next video.